it's time for these guys to move on, Afghanistan, for example. But given the expanding congressional investigations, a lot of questions about the administration's handling, how much Benghazi do you think will be in the next debate?
I do think, John, it's a certainty. It is, I will say, an important issue to investigate. The administration's investigating it, the Congress is investigating it. That's good. That's professionals doing their job. They happen to be professional politicians, too, but that is the job of the Congress of the United States and also the Pickering investigation that the administration has sponsored. The hard thing for both of these guys is I think they made important mistakes on this issue. The administration clearly did not have all the facts when they started saying that they had all the facts, and so the initial stories they say were overtaken. Problem. Governor Romney, on the other hand, also didn't have all the facts, and he issued a statement right when the attacks were happening that struck a lot of people, even Republicans, as very, very political. So both of these guys have a vulnerability on it. They'll each try to exploit it. So it's certain to come up. But frankly, there's tens of thousands of Americans still in harm's way fighting the longest war of American history, and I hope we have a thorough discussion about Afghanistan, because that's actually, I think, the real flashpoint and maybe the biggest divide between the two candidates.
So, Ari, draw the lines as you see them. Governor Romney is the challenger. He has to step across the commander-in-chief threshold, if you will, on a number of issues. How much time does he want to spend around the world, and how much does he want to try to narrow in to get some advantage out of Benghazi?
Well, it's not to get advantage out of Benghazi, John, but the fact of the matter is Benghazi was the first successful terrorist attack on our country since September 11th, 2001. And we as a country have an obligation to figure out how and why it happened. After all, our embassies and our consulates around the world are built like forts. They're built like forts because we know that they're targets. So how in the case of Benghazi was America struck? There were security failures. There were blunders made. Who, why, how? All of this is vital to making sure we learn so it doesn't happen again. Now, in the handling of it and the explanation for it, this administration was terribly ham-handed. It really looked to me as if, for political reasons, they did not want to indicate that America had been struck by terrorism. They wanted to downplay it. They wanted to attribute it to a YouTube video. That way, politically, the president could continue to score points off of his successful killing of bin Laden and the suggestion he's kept us safe from terrorism. So it's a serious, legitimate governing issue. It ought to come up. It's part of what commander-in-chiefs do to keep us safe.
And Paul, this debate on national security, foreign policy, it will be in Florida, a key swing state. It will be in Boca, a place where you find a lot of Jewish voters who care a great deal about the relationship with Israel, U.S. support for Israel. You know, the president has talked to Prime Minister Netanyahu by phone. He's tried to downplay Governor Romney's suggestion that there's distance, that he's throwing him under the bus. If Governor Romney turns and says, well, Mr. President, when you're in New York, why did you go on The View and not meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu? How does the president respond?
Well, I think he goes through how many times he has met with him, and when he's spoken to him on the phone. You know, we do have this new contraption, thanks to Alexander Graham Bell, where he can talk to the Israeli prime minister at any time. And then I think he'll pivot to what's really been noteworthy, that the Israeli military and intelligence leaders have been so vocal. I can't remember them being this vocal about America's leadership. And they've said, especially Defense Minister Ehud Barak, a former prime minister, opposite party of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but in a coalition government with him, and the most highly decorated soldier in the history of the Israeli Defense Forces. Ehud Barak has said he's never had better, stronger military and intelligence cooperation from the United States than he's had under the Obama administration.
When the issue comes up, Ari, Governor Romney obviously can be thinking, you know, if I could swing a couple hundred, couple thousand Jewish votes in Florida, maybe that makes the difference. So where is the line between trying to play that up and the risk of looking like someone who may be, to borrow a term that was used against your former boss, cowboy diplomacy, if you will, when the nation's pretty tired about wars?
Well, it's not a question of cowboy diplomacy or any other kind of diplomacy. It's a question about, is America moving away from a friend, Israel, to establish neutrality? And I say, good try, Paul. But the fact of the matter is this is an administration that has a serious Israel problem. There is an Israel gap, and Barack Obama has brought it on. He brought it on from the very beginning of the administration in his Cairo speech when he equated the founding of Israel with because of the Holocaust with the suffering of the Palestinians. He brought it on when he talked about condemning Israel for building houses. And he brought it on himself when he talked about returning to the 1967 borders with land swaps, a brand new terminology that previous presidents deliberately avoided because they knew it was so provocative. And finally, he brought it on when he said, in regard to the French president, who said Netanyahu was a liar, the president said, I have to deal with him every day in exasperation. This administration, this president, are deliberately weak on Israel, and in Florida in particular, and Ohio. It will be a significant issue in the Jewish community. You already see the signs of weakness that the president has there.
Ari Fleischer, Paul Wigall.